It's late. I just got back from work and I burned my dinner. So, being made to suffer the indignities of the latest travails and woes Finchinator has foisted upon me, I am in an appropriately irritated mood to talk to you about the evolution of arguably DPP's most irritating Pokemon. Yes, more than Jirachi, whose evolution has largely been a quest of ways it can make itself more irritating. So, Breloom, back in the Diamond and Pearl days, and for a long, long, long time throughout. I'm talking throughout the entire generation and well into the metagame's development after the generation became an old gen and continued being played. This thing was synonymous with the substitute focus punch set. Yes, it did have some variation, both in that sub punch set and in an alternative set, but by and large, this thing was Spore, Substitute, Seed Bomb, and Focus Punch. So little variations mean, some people would run more speed, some people would run more bulk. Actually, the standard was more speed, and I remember running a lot of HP investment on Breloom was kind of a deviation, in the Heart Gold, Soul Silver times around the time Latias was up for a suspect, Salamence after it. And then there were other things like some players would run Stone Edge over Seed Bomb to mess with Zapdos, or against some smart French player who thought they would get one over on you with a Crobat, or Resthog Gyarados was very popular at the time. Although, as we would later learn, Resthog Gyarados as a Brelomancer was not sustainable. But, at the time, the de facto method of handling Breloom was spinning with Fortress and then walling it with Resthog Gyara in the Platinum into Heart Gold and Soul Silver days. But that's not even really the point. It's more that whatever it was going to be Spore, Sub, Seed Bomb, Focus Punch. Yes, Stone Edge, okay, sure, whatever. But by and large, it was going to be Seed Bomb. You never wanted to make a habit of Stone Edge and then struggling against, Swampert of all things, my God. So that was really just this thing that it did to say, oh, well, I can do some alternative stuff. The main alternative to the Sub Punch standard was Leech Seed over in that Seed Bomb Stone Edge slot, but you wouldn't just throw Leech Seed on it over the standard on the standard set, because then your only attacking move is Focus Punch, and if you don't have that immediate damage of Seed Bomb to dish out, why do you need offensive investment? So the standard on the Subseed set was Impish, max defense, close to max HP. This thing was actually a pretty good hit taker because it resists both of Tyranitar's stabs and Gyarados' Waterfall, traits it still uses to great effect today. And yeah, so that's basically what it did alternatively. And yes, not being able to immediately hit Swampert, still bad. So you, again, didn't want to make a habit of it, but it was so irritating to deal with because Leech Seed, Poison Heal, monstrously obnoxious combination. Problem is that during Gen 4's time as a current gen, Celebi was a lot more popular. And, Celebi takes absolutely nothing from Leech Seed, obviously. But if your Focus Punch isn't invested, then you can't even, let's say, pressure it into a recover as easily with Rocks and Sand. So, yeah, that's the main variation. And that set was never really too popular. But there were some non-sub punch variations. So the big one was Choice Scarf. And, you just completely dispense with the Toxic Orb thing, because at the beginning of the game, you are outspeeding most everything, and Fast Sleep is really good. Then you come back in later in the game, and you have a perfectly solid Revenge Killer, because you've got great stabs, you've got coverage from Stone Edge, and you switch in fairly decently. You've got a nice Earthquake resist as well. And you threaten a whole lot of things that would normally beat you in a one-on-one, but now the tables are turned, like Infernape, just completely gone. Gengar wants to switch into your Seed Bomb and force you out. Well, now it gets 2 KO'd with Rocks Up. So Scarf Breloom, definitely not a standard, but it was a nice Pokemon. And you could even, you could run Poison Heal to be safe, so you could switch into Toxic or T-Spikes or whatever. But Effect Spore also had the tendency to do some dumb things. You switch it into T-Tar Crunch. Oh, whoops, your T-Tar is now status in some form. So Yeah, Scarf was pretty decent. Its main flaw is that, yes, you get the jump on Azelf and most everything else, but its max speed stat is 262, meaning with a Scarf, it goes up to 393, meaning it is 1 point below Aerodactyl. So you can't cover everything with it. But then again, you can't cover every lead with it in general. So it was a nice lead, and Scarf Breloom continues to be used today. Rarely on some offense teams, but the general idea is on these offense teams that want to deny rocks early on, then you don't necessarily want to commit to a fast taunt lead because those fast taunt leads are frail. And with Azelf being the clear example, and Arrow, of course, then your playstyle is going to be rocks and then feint. So with Scarf Breloom pulling that anti-rocks deal, then you have a Pokemon that can shut down early rocks and can also come back in and be used as a threat later in the game. So that gives you, not having to play 5v6 every single time is really nice. In current gen, Breloom was also a pretty good lead because Swampert lead was really, really common. And you could status other things like Sash and Fernape lead, Shukaberry Heatran, the common Akaberry Metagross. It kind of died. Roserade leads. I mean, yes, natural cure, but you get the faster sleep on them. Scarf Breloom was actually so popular for a time that if you go into the RMT archive and you look up Atticus's team Strongbots, this is the team he used to win the Smogon Frontier, a tournament that's not around anymore because it was deemed unreasonably difficult to beat. But there were a couple players who won it, and Atticus was the first. And the team he used for most of his Frontier matches used a Scarf Azelf lead. And if you look at why he used the Scarf Azelf lead, it was legitimately because he wanted to get the jump on Scarf Breloom lead, because it was that common to shut down standard Azelf. I think Scarf Roserade was kind of popular for the same reason, but I remember Breloom being mentioned. So it was actually, in those Diamond and Pearl, early Platinum days, it was actually quite common. The presence of Lead Machamp, spamming its Lumberry, completely destroyed Pokemon relying on status in the lead slot for quite a long time. So Scarf Breloom didn't really make a huge comeback, or it was kind of knocked out of. It was kind of on the specific side to begin with, just because it didn't play the rocks game or the anti-lead game. Because in the current gen, it was mostly you're getting your rocks, whether it's fast, Azelf, Arrow, or bulky. Metagross, Swampert, Heatran. Or if you're not getting up rocks, then you're using a lead that punishes them for getting up rocks. Dragonite, Machamp, Empoleon. Empoleon can also set up rocks. Specs Heatran can also be punishing in this regard. Choice Band Azelf. And since Breloom didn't really fit into either of these categories, then it was on the more specific side. Even if you wanted to run Scarf Sleep, then you could also use Roserade, because it actually outspeeds Arrow, number one, and also has the utility of Leaf Storm. Toxic Spikes, sorry, because you can still set it up on the Switch. But yeah, it was still, good, but then Lead Machamp came around and it just kind of fell out of favor. But now it's, used more again. Xcal has a very nice team with it. It's just a bulky offense that abuses Gyarados and Dragonite without having to run a spinner or commit to a fast taunt lead. That's a great use of it. And you enable these rocks weak Pokemon while still with an offensive threat of your own, because again, Breloom is also an offensive threat as a Scarfer. So yeah, that turned into a bit of a thing on why Scarf Breloom is great, because it is. But yeah, that was around ever since the Diamond and Pearl days. So the other variants, so these sets we're talking about now, these are all current gen. The other variant that was around during current gen is what we'll call the Husk Loom. Well, not what we'll call it. That is what it was called. Husk, for those who don't know, is one of the greatest players to ever play, and he was coming up with this Breloom, and it had a lot of success. And then people were calling it the Husk Loom. So the idea is, with Sub Punch, yes, you are going to be incredibly scary. Because stab focus punch is just unbelievably, it's going to smack even resist. Excuse me. And with Spore, it's terrifying and everything. But you are going to be in situations sometimes where you need to hit something in front of you, but you cannot, because you need to hit it with a fighting move and you don't have a substitute up. The most embarrassing situation of this, and a sleep clause is active, so you can't Spore it. The most embarrassing situation is that you've slept something else and then you lose to Blissey one-on-one, especially if it has Ice Beam or Flamethrower, because you can only Seed Bomb it. Not that Seed Bomb doesn't do respectable damage, but not enough, in these situations it's in, especially if Breloom's taken a beating, which it often does, because Breloom is a Pokemon who, thanks to its Poison Heal recovery, is very, very good at getting in and bludgeoning the opponent because it heals even in sand, and this is really major. We'll come back to that later. So it does tend to really get in the action. It doesn't have to be kept in pristine condition like a sweeper, like a setup sweeper, but like a late game setup sweeper, I should say. But that also means sometimes you're going to have to threaten something with it, and you're not going to be in perfect health. So the worst situation is against Blissey, right? So you want to focus punch its lights out, but you can't because you can't spore it, and it's just going to break your sub every time. And then a lot of the offense teams that Breloom anchors, these special offense teams that need some physical presence, well, what happens when your Pokemon that forces out Blissey supposedly gets forced out by Blissey too? Then you're in a real terrible position. So what if you had a fighting stab that didn't rely on substitute, right? That's where superpower comes in. So Husk pretty much used Spore and Seed Bomb because obviously you want those, but Superpower over Focus Punch. And this is really major because now you have that immediate threat, and you can put Blissey away. You could even, like, let's say Blissey wanted to stay in and absorb the spore and force you to spore and then switch out. Anything silly like that, you can just drop it, and you would have all sorts of situations like that. Breloom, the possibility of Breloom attacking immediately and gaining major mileage out of it was already well known, because the average level of play, let's say, is always going to be Spore with Breloom first because it's safe, right? So sometimes really good players would get more out of it by subbing first, because you sub and they switch to something slower and you still have that Spore available. You are just at a new level of threat. Or, the most hilarious example is Swampert trying to absorb the Spore, and you just get Seed Bombed, and then you drop. So situations like that, really alerted players to the possibilities of how scary Breloom can be when it attacks immediately. You do not need to Spore with it to make it a major threat, which is why sometimes nowadays you see threats. You see Brelooms that don't even run Spore at all. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, or I am, because that's what I do. They were alerted to those possibilities, and the Husk Loom is kind of an extension of that. So it's not just Spore, Seed Bomb, Superpower. Although Superpower also lets you stay in and immediately threaten something like Tyranitar, which could take a Seed Bomb, so it might stay in and try to slug it out with you. And in the last slot, Husk used Facade. Now, with Toxic Orb, Breloom basically gets Facade, which against neutral targets actually hits harder than Seed Bomb, because Seed Bomb is 80, with Stab becomes 120, and Facade goes from 70 doubled to 140. So if you have a Pokemon that both moves are completely neutral against, let's just say Mew, just because it's a Psychic type, I know it's not an OU, then the choice between Seed Bomb and Facade, well, it's actually Facade is the stronger one. Incidentally, when some players were messing around with bulky Poison Heal attacking Breloom in Black and White OU, then a lot of them would drop Seed Bomb because Facade was stronger against things like Reuniclus. In addition to its coverage against a lot of grass and fighting resist, which is why Husk was using it to begin with on the Husk Loom, because you would throw in, like we mentioned, Celebi before. Now, Facade is not immediately breaking through Celebi, but it pressures it a hell of a lot better than Focus Punch. And it's also getting its Zapdos. Gotta really pressure Zapdos with Rocks Up. And even the stronger neutral hits are great against something like Gyarados or Gliscor. That's another reason why Subseed Breloom stopped being used, by the way, because one-on-one it loses to Toxic Gliscor, which is the standard at the time, and Breloom is relied on as a stall breaker, so you want standard sub Seed Bomb Focus Punch Breloom, because Gliscor, it might taunt your Spore and your sub, whatever, who cares? EQ's bouncing off, you Seed Bomb it forever, and if it roosts, Seed Bomb becomes super effective. So you chase it out, you beat it. Breloom beating Gliscor, good. Breloom being stopped by Gliscor, bad. Not that there aren't ways around it, of course, but for general purposes, you want that. Anyway, so yeah, Facade hitting Gliscor and things harder. And at the time that this was used, then the dragons are running around. So you hit Latios, resisting both stabs really, really well, and you hit Salamence. And even if you take both those dragons out, and yes, Latios does come back eventually, Facade is still a great move, because instead of hitting Salamence, you're hitting Dragonite. So yeah, the husk loom was good for that purpose, and because it was not required to do this, but it very often was run with a jolly nature, which opened up a lot of opportunities against it. So one-on-one against Gyarados, that's a really big one, and you would also get the jump on what am I thinking of? Well, bait Tyranitar number one, because if you're against a good player who's using one of those fast bait Tyranitars with Babiri Berry and Flamethrower, because the dragon era was the age of Scizor, so you want to pursue something and then just fry the Scizor afterwards. You don't want to have that same trick pulled on your Breloom, which is something that Tyranitar eventually, as Breloom was taking over the metagame more and more in the post DPP post Dragons metagame, then you really wanted to be careful against Breloom, and that's why T-Tar adapted sets, and then Breloom started adapting back. So there was a similar dynamic, but I think back then, it's back then the things that you were covering are not as prominent now, and you put a lot of pressure on Bold Celebi. That's the number one thing with the speed, because it takes no speed or a couple speed EVs for Celebi to outspeed max speed Adamant Breloom, but those Celebes are also running a bold nature and pretty much max defense, so you don't really want to go up to 263 to outrun Adam and Gara and Jolly well, not that Jolly Metagross was really used back then, but yeah, things like that. You outrun Jolly T-Tar and that's it, 244. Anything else, you're going to start cutting into your bulk. So yeah, Breloom would be able to outspeed Celebi, so if you got some chip damage on it, you could actually threaten it with a 2 KO, rocks and sand. And Breloom is healing in sand while Celebi is not. And this is a recurring reason why Breloom is so good, whatever set you go with it, besides the Scarf set, obviously. And, another set that we'll get to later. But you will generally outlast a lot of your checks if you, not because of passive damage, although very possible with some other sets that have popped up in more recent years, but if it really rewards a player who can position the Breloom over and over and over again so that they can bludgeon the opponent, not just, through brute force, but through weakening them systematically, make them take some chip damage, some rocks damage, some double switches, get some pursuit chip, whatever it is, and you will be rewarded for it. So what Breloom really exemplifies is the natural synergy, a lot of passive damage, or quasi-passive damage, or common team support, let's say, if we're including pursuit, this common team support has with fighting types, because let's look at the types that resist fighting. We've got flying, weak to stealth rock. We've got ghost and psychic, weak to pursuit, and U-turn as well in the case of psychic. And bug and the OU bugs, Scizor and Fortress, are not resisting fighting. So, and even if there was like another bug that resisted, bug is also generally stealth rock weak, so no bug type is ever going to be better than stealth rock neutral. And a lot of these Pokemon are also very affected by sand, whereas Breloom heals. So you see where Breloom has the advantage over them if it can just get on the field. And with that amazing typing, Breloom is very robust at getting on the field, creating those opportunities. So yeah, I mean, there is another OU bug that is sometimes used that does technically resist both its stabs in Heracross, but Heracross also does not have and some people in more recent years used Sleep Talk Choice Band Heracross at the peak of Breloom hatred, where they just wanted to destroy it and using everything to do it. And I mean, it's not a bad Pokemon for sure, but it certainly isn't a great Breloom answer because of how much damage it takes from the fighting moves, and even just Seed Bomb, honestly, with rocks and sand. So yeah, and Facade, obviously, if we're going to go back to the Husk Loom. So yeah, that's where Facade comes in. It synergizes really well, hitting these common checks, which are already commonly handled by things like rocks, sand, U-turn, and pursuit. Things that you don't really have to go out of your way to throw on your team, T-Tar, and you have, most of those alone. And, you throw on the U-turn with a bunch of other Pokemon that you're already naturally throwing alongside Loom, like Flygon, and there you go. So yeah, so those are the Breloom variants during the current gen. Scarf still used nowadays. Husk Loom is not really used nowadays, but you could. There's no reason why you couldn't on certain teams. And Sub Punch is actually still used, not so much nowadays, because we have been discovering for a while that Breloom just has such insane utility in its typing and its move pool, beyond just sub punch. Because again, that reliance on sub punch can mean, yes, it has the capability of unleashing insane damage, but it's also limited in the spots it can pick. It really relies on sleeping something. Once sleep clause goes off, it's a lot easier to manage because it requires that sub to do fighting type damage, so it can't threaten those Pokemon that it threatens with fighting moves as well. But yeah, when Dugtrio was around, Sub Breloom was really, really scary because it could potentially protect itself from being revenge killed by Doug. And with good play, I mean, it's always scary. It's just generally an obnoxious Pokemon to deal with, especially if you lead off with that sub, with the spore pressure. If there's like a Swampert that you generally, I've had games where the Breloom, if you're really gonna take it to the next level, you're gonna say, oh well, Swampert should never stay in and risk it, and then the Breloom subs and the Swampert roars it. Horrible feeling for the Breloom user, and for the Swampert user, it's the best feeling on earth. So yeah, that's current gen Breloom. So current gen, goes to about from 06 and ends in 2010. So I mean, we can call it 07 if we're going to be super accurate, but people were starting to play it late 06, and then 2010 fall, and then it just continues in this vein. Breloom becomes especially dangerous post Dragons, and it's Firewater Grass Core is taking over the metagame, but it's still the same old Breloom. By and large, it is Sub Punch. So the biggest development is that with Fortress Stall being the preeminent stall archetype, and then people realize, okay, well, since Fortress really, really needs to spin to enable Rest Talk Gara, then a big method of managing stall is going to be using a Stealth Rocker that can repeatedly keep the rocks up against such teams. This is not very difficult to do because the number one Stealth Rocker post Dragons was already becoming Heatran. So with Heatran, even if it's not Heatran, then it can be, let's say, Stealth Rock Fire Blast Tyranitar, which was similarly good. And I mean, there you have that Sand Rocks potentially Pursuit Breloom support. Sometimes it's a little much to put Rocks and Pursuit on T-Tar, but it depends. So yeah, this is the development that we're seeing in that stage where 4E teams are slowly falling by the wayside. And Swampert is actually falling by the wayside because it's such a victim for Fortress stuff and Breloom stuff. But eventually, when Starmie becomes the new most popular spinner because it so readily dominates Heatran, Heatran adapts, with Pursuit support or Pasho HP Grass, stuff like that. But what we're interested in here is that Swampert comes back because it is actually pretty good into Starmie. With it could use some support for sure, but T-Tar or a Ghost. But generally, Swampert does well enough. And if you can keep those rocks up, Breloom, give Breloom rocks, and Breloom will give you everything. So and some sand, of course, but if there's no sand, it actually benefits because it will heal even more from Poison Heal. So it goes both ways. Anyway, so this post DPP development, is taking span over like 2011, 2012, 2013, and then in 2014. And I'm really sorry to use myself as an example here, but that is kind of what happened. Well, not kind of, but yeah, I started messing around with some Breloom sets because I wanted to use Leech Seed. Because it is incredibly obnoxious for stall teams to deal with. Since Bold Celebi was completely dropping. And so you could pretty much Leech Seed and no matter what, hit something. You weren't worrying about being completely blanked, post Sleep Clause, or having to say, oh, well, do I want a Seed Bomb or Focus Punch? You weren't as reliant on Substitute, because the way I wanted to run it was not the standard Spore, Subseed, Focus Punch, but I wanted to keep Seed Bomb on it. So it would have Leech Seed and Seed Bomb, because getting walled by Gliscor is stupid. And this way you would have a Leech Breloom, which harasses pretty much everything else and doesn't lose to Gliscor. So best of both worlds. Hannah Montana. Forever the unifying theory of how to take your thesis and then the antithesis and then synthesize it into a new strategy. And then you do that forever and ever. And that's the Pokemon metagame. And that's life, in fact, if you're doing it right. Anyway. So Sorry, I just got caught up in the brilliance of my own Hannah Montana metaphor. But then again, I do that every day. So yeah, we've got a seed bomb Breloom and with leech seed, and the idea was, okay, well, what's the fighting move going to be? So I was thinking about it, and I happened upon Mach Punch because a lot of these offensive teams that Breloom was being used on, they were using Scarf Heatran, which was the best set in the metagame at the time. And even the ones with Scarf Flygon tended to not be super safe against late game DD Tyranitar. So that was the main reason. Being safer against DD-Tar is really good because Breloom with its natural typing and bulk, yes, you can bulk it out so it can take a +1 DD-Tar, Ice, or Fire Punch, sure. But that requires you to really stay healthy. And we know Breloom likes getting in the thick of the action and getting, even if it's at decent enough health, it's still not going to be in tanking T-Tar health, pretty much, right? And even if you give it Impish max defense, it's still going to be quite a task. And generally, you like strong seed bombs. So with Mach Punch, you are checking T-Tar so long as Breloom is alive, and that's really, really important. And there are other benefits. The main one I had in mind at the time was, oh, this will be really, really good against Agility and Polion, because Agility and Polion was becoming really, really popular among these XY Oris players who were coming into DPP and going, oh, well, this thing's strong, and slapping it onto offense teams. And I was baffled. I was like, yes, it's a great Pokemon, but on every team. But the real use of Mach Breloom wound up being not just picking off DD-Tar or Empoleon or Scarf Heatran once it hit a certain range. It was pretty much picking off everything. And this is hard to quantify, but let me just throw examples at you. 30% Infernape. Previously going to chase out Breloom every time. Now Breloom is chasing that Infernape out, or just picking it off. Super Rachi at 15%. Breloom dropping it. You can't check a Breloom with it, or Breloom can check this. Even being able to pick off a 9% Dragonite is going to be absolutely huge. The extra chip damage is just fantastic. So it was very quickly realized, hey, this Mach Punch Breloom set is really good. And then I figured, okay, Leech Seed is nice, but I think it would be more consistent if it had a stronger fighting stab than just Mach Punch. And so what I threw on over Leech Seed was at first Focus Punch, because with just Spore, you are still going to be able to throw out Focus Punches pretty well. In fact, this was another way that people would take advantage in current gen of attacking immediately with Breloom where they weren't expected to. It wasn't just, sub first or seed bomb first or whatever. Even after the Spore, you think, okay, well, the natural line is, for if you're going to Spore first, then you sub to make sure you hit that Focus Punch, right? And so players would play around it. They would do things like go to a U-turn Flygon or Infernape or Scizor, and then Breloom subs up, and it tightens its focus, and then that Pokemon U-turns, and then they switch to Gengar or Rotom, and no damage has been taken, besides rocks or whatever. Sand. But, yeah. So if you Focus Punch first, obviously you can't send that Gengar or Rotom or that other, Focus Punch Absorber into Breloom right away because, oh no, what if it Seed Bombs? Like a Starmie, let's say. But if you send in that U-turner on the sub, then you're going to dance around it. So what if you Spore? Oh, there's the Focus Punch right away. I can't tell you how many times I saw someone drop an Infernape or Flygon. And it's not even like you could blame that player for doing it. That was a good move to make. Oh, well, I'm going to U-turn on the sub and then I'll be fine. The safe version of that is you sub and then you U-turn, or you sub again on the U-turn. But that wasn't always reliable. And Scizor was actually a slower U-turner, so you couldn't even do that. Flygon sub might not even break it, if you were running a bulkier loom. So, and physical mixed life orb Infernape could close combat you, so you weren't always 100%. And remember, in DPP, sub doesn't take life orb damage. Sorry, you don't take life orb damage if you hit a sub, I should say. So, yeah, with that you could rocket off that Focus Punch immediately. If you ever played Black and White during the current gen, or before Sleep Plus was legal, a lot of fighting gem Brelooms would use this too. You wouldn't see Technician Breloom with sub or anything like that, you would run Sash Breloom or Fighting Gem Breloom. You would sport, and then something slept, and you launch that focus punch right away. So it's a similar idea. Just in current gen, it would be, why would I even bother with sub when I can just right away throw that focus punch out? Similar idea to in advance, when you would back in the day, Veteran and Loves T-Tar or Vil T-Tar was the sub one. Sub, Rock Slide, Focus Punch, HP Bug. Sometimes switched out for HP Grass when used by players like G80 or Gene, I should say. But yeah, sometimes those players would be like, well, I'm facing this Blissey, right? This Blissey is never going to actually stay in on my T-Tar and give me the free sub. So why would I waste the health I'm getting back from sub, waste the health from sub when I could just get that focus punch right away? You know, naked focus punch, you can call it. And with Breloom, it's a similar idea. So with this in mind, this new Mach Punch Breloom can run focus punches at stab quite reliably. Spore, Mach Punch, Seed Bomb, Focus Punch. Great set. But if you wanted even more reliability to it, then I started thinking, well, what if instead of Focus Punch, we took the ideas we learned from Husk Breloom and we made it Superpower. And this Mach Breloom became the standard for years. Like pretty much the only set you would run. Spore, Mach, Seed Bomb, Superpower. I remember Badass, which is the name of a player who was around back then. Great player. He really liked the combination of Focus Punch and Mach Punch, because if you don't hit into an immunity on the switch, it is basically guaranteed whatever their collective base power is. So he really liked that. And with Superpower, yes, it's weaker, and then you drop your attack, whatever, but the consistency, you know, being able to immediately threaten Spit Out Heatran, which is popular if you're running a faster version of the Breloom, or Skarmory one-on-one. Oh my god, that's a big one. You know, Skarmory's going to try and Brave Bird on the Focus Punch. I've seen have this interaction so many times, but now you just, you know, pick off Skarmory from certain health. And remember, at this time, Skarm is very is not almost always, it is always specially defensive at this time, because it's taking on things like Subsplit Breloom. It's trying to whirlwind out offensive Suicune. You know, so taking on HP Fires from Shaman. So it is always specially defensive. So Breloom wants to be able to threaten it as reliably as possible. Focus Punch hits it harder. Superpower hits it more consistently in more situations. So yeah, this Breloom starts getting you. I mean, largely thanks to the efforts of many French players, Breloom became more and more popular, you know, post DPP. And you know, we saw how many places it could be used on. You know, because before it kind of had the reputation, oh, it's just kind of a wall breaker. Then we realized, oh no, this thing's really, really consistent. It's not just, you know, that Spore Punch thing. But now with Mach Punch, it's just incredible utility. You know, it's helping you against DD Tar. It's helping you against, you know, pretty much everything that's weakened. You know, even situations you wouldn't really quantify on paper. As a game develops, and with each game having unique situations, you love having that priority as an option. So, good Lord, I told myself I would get to sleep early tonight, so my apologies. But I am trying to meet that still. So yeah, Mach Breloom everywhere. And this is the period, you know, 2014, 15, 16, 17. And this is when people are starting to say, hey, I think this Breloom thing is actually kind of stupid, because it just completely dominates most stall. Now, I won't go into the stall aspect too much, because that's a topic for another video, you know, the evolution of stall and like the teams that were being used. And also, I had a role to play in it, so I hate to talk myself up more. But yeah, basically this Breloom was everywhere, and it was really threatening and all that. And then you would eventually see the rise of physically defensive Skarmory, which continues to be the standard today. Which largely, it was also because of things like CB Gara, but it was by and large a response to Breloom, because when you're Skarmory, I mean, look, it's still not going to be an amazing answer to Focus Punch Breloom or even Superpower Breloom if you play your cards right. But if their game plan is just, oh, well, I Superpower because it threatens the Skarmory, now you are a lot scarier into it. So, yeah, I had some really ambitious ideas for Breloom at this time to make it as threatening as possible. I had one team that was like the apex of my like hyper specific design. It would be a team that provoked T-Spike's lead use from the opponent, you know, with a Zapdos lead, which is already great. So if they're going to have a Roserade or a Nidoqueen, they're going to set up those T-Spikes early, and then you switch Breloom in, you get it poisoned, but you're not actually running Toxic Orb. And then you run fist plate on it, and its mach punches and its superpowers are even scarier. I was so proud of that. I still think it was a good idea, but yeah, that was really ambitious. So yeah, but yeah, standard mach superpower Breloom is a standard for a while, and yeah, the install adapts with physically defensive Skarmory. Playing around with things like that and Nidoqueen, and really taking momentum with offensive Jirachi. So now, the standard Mach Breloom continues to be excellent today. It's one of the most reliable Pokemon you can throw on a team. But now people are realizing, oh, we can branch out. And one of the earliest adaptations of this physically defensive Skarmory thing was, hey, what if I didn't need Mach Punch anymore? Yes, it's amazing. But, for example, the team I first started using Mach Punch Breloom on also had a Choice Band Infernape, which was also running Mach Punch. And Infernape's Mach Punch fulfills many of the same roles that Breloom's does. DD Tar and Polion. Anything that's weak, and by virtue of holding a choice band, then Infernape's is obviously stronger. So obviously having the double Mach Punch is absolutely incredible, right? So much flexibility and all that, but you don't need the double Mach Punch. So in order to break stall more efficiently, then I remember seeing players like Bada Bing running a new dual fight Breloom in that Spore, Seed Bomb, Superpower, and Focus Punch. This is a great set, because you have that sheer wall-breaking power of Focus Punch. Skarm comes in, wallops you, but you're thinking, you know what, I'm kind of safe because it can't really Focus Punch again, and then you Superpower. Or in a one-on-one against Clefable, it showed Focus Punch, so I can stand with my Calm Mind Clefable, which was picking up in popularity around this time. I can threaten it with my Ice Beam. I'm bold-natured, so I don't need to fear Seed Bomb too much. And even, like, if Blissey could take Seed Bombs, then even Calm Clefable could as well. And Calm Mind Clef was the standard for a long time. So you threaten with Ice Beam, and then you just get dropped by Superpower again. So the flexibility of Superpower and the sheer power of Focus Punch, you can fit these both in the same set. And see this whole mixing and matching thing, this is kind of where Breloom's going to go from here. The fact of the matter is, you can run standard Spore, Seed Bomb, Mach Punch, Superpower, Breloom. You can run Superpower Focus Punch. You could theoretically run Spore and 3 fighting moves. Spore, Mach Punch, Superpower, Focus Punch. That is a totally viable set. You could run Mach Punch, Seed Bomb, Superpower, Focus Punch. No Spore. You don't even have to put the sleep somewhere else. It's just, you give yourself more opportunities this way. You could drop Focus Punch for Facade. You could drop it for other things that we're going to discuss. You see where I'm going with this? You could bring Leech Seed back if you wanted. Mach, Seed Bomb, Superpower, Leech Seed. That sounds awesome. Leech Seed. Latias switches in. Latias, yeah, that really loves getting Leech Seeded. Leech Seed is great not just because it keeps Breloom's longevity going with Poison Heal, really healing off that sand even better. If spikes are in play and you haven't been able to spin them, or you don't have a spinner on your team, goes a long way. And it's not just Breloom that it's helping out. It's helping out your teammates. You switch your T-Tar on a Leeched Latias, yeah, it's going to T-Wave, Reflect, whatever. T-Tar's gaining health. And Latias is losing health. So you enable that trap better. You enable T-Tar's ability to take hits better. It's just an incredible move to have. So you could mix and match. And the same goes with the EVs. You could go fast. You could go all out bulk. You could take some EVs out of attack, which I hated doing, but a lot of players had no issue with. And so you could go bulky and fast. You could just go all out bulk with physical defense. There's so many things you could do. So it really was up to the player, up to their team, preferences, what was needed, all that jazz. So that is kind of where we're going from here. But yeah, I wanted to mention, I think I attributed to Bada Bing that dual fight set, because that was a really great set to see. Okay, so now let's, in the post-Latios era, post-Latios and, a Doug Trio being banned, things like that. Now we are really seeing Sporeless Breloom used more and more, as people realize, hey, this thing, it's not even about, oh, I don't even need Spore. Yes, people use Sleep Talk. One of the biggest things about Breloom is that if you use a Sleep Talker to answer it, you are kind of in trouble. It's not just Gyarados and its Stealth Rock weakness. It's the Sleep Talkers in general are all so incredibly flawed. Rotom loses to Breloom. Rest Talk Heatran, an old set, but still, good luck with that. Other Rest Talkers, not really prominent. People would run Sleep Talk Specs Latias and act like that did anything. I mean, they were doing it before Latias came back. Oh, Sleep Talk, Choice Band, Dragonite. Okay, great set. Not if it's your only answer to Breloom, that's not it. You can't do that because Rock's weak, Sand weak, and the way that choice items in Sleep Talk work in DPP as well as Advance is if you run you use a move, let's say your choice band, outrage, whatever, and then your next sleep talk will fail. You can only use one sleep talk choice move at a time. And so that means even Dragonite can be pursued by T-Tar. Then Breloom will come back, and it's the same problem with that Heracross we mentioned earlier. So, and the awesome UU Heracross set of Rest Talk, Life Orb, Stab never took off. Not that it would, really do that much, but yeah. So it wasn't really about that. People were using Sleep Talk Gengar. I mean, cool set for sure, but more of an intermediary answer as opposed to a hard Rest Talking counter a la something like GSC. So it wasn't even about that. I was like, oh, well, all these Rest Talkers are ruining Spore. No one's saying that. In more recent years, we have seen Rest Talk Jirachi with physical defense as a method of overcoming Breloom or helping out against it. And it is fairly sturdy. I won't say it's not, but it's also not invulnerable. I mean, Focus Punch, Leech Seed, Swords Dance, yeah, that's coming up. God, Magnezone support. I haven't even mentioned that whole Scarm thing, Scarm to check Breloom. That whole thing falls apart if you have a Scarm Lord, like Fire Blast T-Tart as well. But depending on its set, Ice Beam, so you can't be checked by Gliscor or Nidoqueen. That really messes up a lot of standard Scarm stall teams that don't run Hippowdon, which is a lot of them was more was than is, but still is. And yeah, so but even besides that, you just throw on a zone, and as soon as Scarm puts on a Shed Shell, then it is less capable of taking on Breloom. So it's a win-win situation because you have to Roost to shrug off its attacks now. So even just a simple double switch into Stealth Rock. I mean, you double switch to Magnezone and chase out the Skarmory. I mean, you're not even double switching to Magnezone to trap the Skarmory anymore. You're just getting the Stealth Rock damage on it, and you're going to put a lot of pressure on it because 12.5%, as opposed to Magnezone, which is rocks resistant, often carries leftovers so that it can effectively trap. I mean, yes, you can run Scarf and still do okay against a lot of Jirachi sets, but a lot of lefty sets would be popular for more security against Jirachi, and so they could run Magnezone to trap Bronzong. So, yeah, there's that. But yeah, Rest Talk Jirachi is pretty much the only Rest Talker that, Rest Talk, even though it gets Wish, pretty much solely for Breloom. That's the kind of effect that it was having. I mean, there were people saying, look, this thing can validate. So then it adapted with physically defensive Skarmory, and Latias came back, and that helped. And, now Rest Talk Jirachi, but it's still a major, major threat. But yeah, so once again, I say all that to say it's not even about, oh, Spore isn't even good. It's more, hey, I have all these amazing moves, and you know what? I actually kind of want to use them more than Spore. Some people want to ban Spore because Sleep is broken. I'm sympathetic to it. I don't feel that strongly about it. If someone told me tomorrow, hey, we're getting rid of Spore in DPP, I would not really mind because, yeah, Sleep is just a stupid mechanic. And Breloom does not really get so much worse because we've already alluded to the possibility of running Sleepless Breloom many times. And there are also now several years of Breloom succeeding without Sleep at all. Just like I am right now, although, whether it's succeeding is questionable. But yeah, we now have several years of testament to that. So the first... Basically, we're going to first mention Leech Seed sets because there were new variants of Leech Seed. It's like, hey, what would be kind of cool? Protect, inspired by Black and White. So Leech Seed, Protect, these could run Spore. These often did run Spore. Spore, Leech Seed, Protect, Move. So in this new metagame, Breloom is now excellent because it's a Leech Seeder that doesn't fear Clefable. Previously, you had to worry about your Leech Seeds being blanked by grass types, right? Celebi, Shaman. Now, Shaman's Leech Seed set was previously really irritating to stall, and then Clefable showed up and knocked it out of the metagame. Breloom is a Leech Seeder that does not fear Clef. So once again, it has that niche of being able to throw out Leech Seeds very, very freely into stall teams. So Spore, Leech Seed, Protect, Move. Now, even more outrageous sounding, the standard easy safe move you can't go wrong with, you could throw in Mach Punch, but generally you want something with a little more oomph to it for one-on-one situations. So Sky Uppercut is the standard. because Drain Punch is bad in DPP. It got buffed in Black and White, and it's always the move there, yes. But in DPP, 8 PP, 60 base power, terrible. You want Sky Uppercut. No, it's not a perfect answer, sure. I'm sure you could run Brick Break, but Sky Uppercut's better power is better against Clef. So it's generally preferable. But, and I attributed this to Osgood, he came up with Spore, Leech, Protect, Facade. That's right, no fighting move, Facade. And it really works because Leech Seed is doing so much of the heavy lifting. Now remember how strong Facade is. Stronger than Seed Bomb. And I believe even stronger than Sky Uppercut. Sky Uppercut is 85, right? Yeah, so it's, unless I'm just completely collapsing on my math, but no, it is stronger than Sky Uppercut as well. So it's actually your strongest neutral move. And you say, oh, well, what about the coverage against Tyranitar? You have a Breloom wall by Tyranitar. Yes, this is where team support comes in. You will not use this Breloom on a set that it has 5 other Pokemon clearly destroyed by T-Tar. So common sense, of course. But in a one-on-one against Gyarados, which you use this answer, with Protect Breloom, you don't fear bounce Gyarados at all. You don't have to like switch out and play those dumb bounce games. No, you just completely shut it down. Much like Protective Bomb Snow and Shaman did before. You will also run... you also beat, I mean, okay, you got to be careful against waters and whatnot, but it's better. Actually, Facade is better than the mono coverage of Sky Uppercut into Starmie, which is not really that much of a threat. You're better into Latios, and you're not going to be running mono Seed Bomb coverage, of course not. So, and it's better into other Breloom, which is really big, and better than Sky Uppercut for sure. And yes, it's not going to hit Clefable as hard, so again, team support, make sure you can handle other Clef. If you can land a knockoff on it with your own Clef, you get some pursuit support, whatever it is, then you will be okay generally. So again, goes hand in hand with common sense. But yeah, and good team building. But yeah, this set is really good. But again, Spore not necessary. So you could very well run Spore. It's not necessary, so you can run it. You could run Leech Seed, Protect, Facade, Mach Punch. Whatever you want. Toxic. And this is a set, I really like Toxic on Leech Breloom and on non-Leech Breloom because you've got these Pokemon like Gliscor and Zapdos and Latios that try to blank Breloom long-term. And yes, you can break through them with other things. But with Toxic, suddenly, that whole thing where Breloom already is very good at outlasting things? Well, I mean, hello, this is even better. So, yeah, but you can also use that on a more offensive set. I mean, these Leech Brelooms are generally very heavily defensively invested. You want to be taking those hits from Gara, from T-Tar, also remember, if it's not a DD Tar or a Mixed Tar, then you're probably going to be beating a lot of it with Leech Protect. And I mean, honestly, even once you've leeched it, then, Facade will get the job done, funnily enough. So yeah, it's a great set, but you can mix it up, obviously. But yeah, but these are very defensive Breloom sets because they're, hit takers. But, and even special defensive Breloom started becoming more popular. Maybe not all out special defense necessarily, but just being able to more readily take an Ice Beam from Suicune, let's say, is really helpful. So, you've got that. And you can run Toxic on offensive Breloom too. Just put it over Spore. Mach Punch, Seed Bomb, Superpower, Toxic. And there you go. So now, Gliscor is walling me because another Pokemon that was starting to be used on these Clefable balances to handle Breloom reliably. Remember how earlier we said Toxic Gliscor was the standard during current gen? Well, I was really frustrated running these bulky teams that were so annoyed by Breloom. And boy, I went through a lot of bulky teams using a lot of different methods to try to handle it. Yeah, Sleep Talk Roserade, Rest Talk Heatran, plus other stuff. And one of my proudest was running a hazard team that had Swampert without Stealth Rock. So the idea was by the time Pert came in, hazards would already be up. So you could immediately threaten Breloom or Starmie, with Roar or just either of the attacks. So that was kind of a not defense, not reactively answering to them, but taking their opportunities away, being more aggressive with it. So I was really pleased with that. But yeah, I even made some pieces like Moltres and stuff. And I like Crobat a lot. Crobat, great poke. Yeah, but point being, you can just run Toxic. Yeah, so Gliscor, that's where I was going with this. So the standard of Taunt Toxic, I was like, well, okay, Toxic is amazing and everything, and you ruin water types, blah, 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 whatever. Great, fine. But this Breloom thing. I mean, here we have a Pokemon that's good at taking hits from Breloom that can't actually hurt it back. Breloom switches into it. So over Toxic, I started using Ice Fang and works really well. I actually got the idea from an old Wi-Fi battle where in the summer of 2010, Breloom was rampaging post Ments, and someone used an Aerial Ace Gliscor, and I was like, hey, a player named Omar. Oh yeah, memories. Anyway, so Aerial Ace, and then I was like, okay, that's cool and all, but Ice Fang will get the job done, and it has better coverage against Flygon and Dragonite and other Gliscor. So that's really helpful as well. And then, but some teams really need to threaten the Oko on Breloom, not the extended, beat down of Ice Fang, which gets the job done. But sometimes you need to be more immediate if you're giving Breloom a lot of opportunities, mainly. So in those situations, you prefer Wing Attack, not Aerial Ace, Wing Attack, because Sandvale got banned, thank God. And so there's no situation where you need Aerial Ace's perfect accuracy, and Wing Attack has a lot more PP. So yeah, Gliscor started being more popular used on these balances. Oh, is Gliscor going to be an option to handle Breloom? Well, then I Toxic it. Bulky Zapdos, Latios, those are the big targets, but it's just generally a good move. So yeah, another status Breloom can throw out, Stun Spore, very effective. And we'll get to a set that really likes running Stun Spore at the end. But yeah, now the other set is Swords Dance. So, you want to wall Breloom with Skarmory? Okay, I mean, Focus Punch superpower is one thing. What if you just went straight up SD? SD Facade is a great set because now even bulky Latias is going to have trouble withstanding you. And yeah, this is especially a great set on paralysis focused teams as a kind of supplement to Machamp. But it doesn't need. I mean, paralysis is nice, and Jirachi pairs so well with it, you're going to give it paralysis support without even trying. So you can outspeed things like Heatran. But it's just a generally great Pokemon because whatever set you run on Breloom, its innate traits are just so effective. But yeah, SD also has a lot of variants. You can run SD Mach Punch. You can run SD Facade. You can run SD whatever, SD Spore. Most SD variants don't even run Spore. But if you really wanted to, you could run SD and then Spore in 2 stabs. It's whatever. SD Stone Edge, I probably wouldn't run that. I think Facade is more reliable for dealing with Gara and D-Knight and stuff. But Zapdos is the main one even with SD. But yeah, someone at work was like, "Hey, your voice is getting hoarse. Are you like talking a lot, yelling a lot?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know." Yeah, so that's SD for you. Great set. And then mix and match, and you've got all those. And then finally, the most recent set is Sash Lead. So again, Spore Breloom is a great Pokemon in the lead slot. Honestly, even at the peak of Breloom mania in the mid 2010s, then sometimes even leading off with Toxic or Breloom was the best choice, just because you could pretend it was Scarf on the first turn, and it still had some pretty good lead matchups naturally. So yeah, but there's now the Sash lead, which Scarf is still good, of course, but with Sash, you're not trying to function as a block rocks at all costs kind of Pokemon. Just you naturally punish a lot of things. If you want to play more fast paced with Breloom, on hyper offense style teams, Breloom is generally not used because it doesn't have that immediate setup with the wide reach of a Dragon Dancer or the cutting priority of an SDE Speed Lucario or something. So generally, if you want to play more aggressive with it, you want a Pokemon that can be faster or make itself faster. So you have to be more cautious. That kind of caution doesn't really go well for hyper offense teams. So what you do instead, you let yourself play this Breloom extremely aggressively. Not aggressively in the case that you wouldn't with other Breloom, but more aggressively in this case that you can be very cavalier with its health, i.e. you have the Sash, you can stay in on Heatrans and things like that. So yeah, you Spore, and then you just barrage the opponent with your stabs, and often Stun Spore. So it's very simple in that regard. It's got a lot of great lead matchups. Very difficult to stop from sporing one thing and then threatening heavy damage on the other, or just making the game effectively 5-5 and they revenge kill you, so you can preserve it. You have a sacrifice, so it's technically a 6-5, and you have momentum and advantage and all that great stuff. Yeah, that's basically it. You can mix and match. You can run. This was used a lot. This SPL, last SPL, but Spore, Seed Bomb, Focus Puncher, Superpower. Stone Edge, Stun Spore is really good because Gengar pivots in. Gengar's ruined 75% of the time. Latias, whatever it is, dual status generally great. You sleep one thing, you paralyze another. I mean, good lord, that's an amazing start to the game. It's incredible support for the big hitters that you're pairing the Breloom with. So yeah, this Sash Breloom is very, very popular on these highly offensive teams, and that is basically it. Yeah, so that is everything Breloom does now. So let's see. I'm trying to see if I feel like I'm forgetting something, and it's going to drive me crazy if I don't at least give myself a chance to remember it in detail. But at the same time, I should also trust myself on these things. It's like when I leave the apartment and then I'm like, hey, I turned like the oven off, right? It's like, and then I go back in. I'm like, yes, I did. So, um, yeah, I'm sure there are definitely combinations of Breloom that haven't been tried yet. I'm sure there's someone just waiting out there waiting to use Leach Swords Dance or something. Um, Honestly, that kind of sounds annoying. Less, reliable. I mean, some of these Brooms are going to be more or less consistent than others, but it's just generally going to be such a fundamentally great Pokemon. Yeah. So, okay. So you know what? I'll just flesh out the Sash Loom thing. It's great for these use on hyper offense teams where you want a little more punch at the beginning because yes, Azelf, Rocks lead, momentum, great, awesome, but sometimes you want to do a little bit more direct damage. So when you send in your big wall breakers, then you already have given them more to work with in the case, specifically in that they are not contending with a fully healthy team. So with that, I mean, Machamp is again a very popular, effective partner to Breloom on these teams. And with Breloom leading off, you are also more directly helping it out. Or if it's not Machamp, it can be a Scarf Lucario cleaning up. Then by doing this, you are luring out their fighting type answers early and directly doing something to them. Whether you're just paralyzing them, especially nasty with Machamp, but not required. Just the speed drop is effective for supporting things like Metagross and Gyarados and many variants of T-Tar and Dragonite. Notice how a lot of these like big hyper offense hitters are very mid-range speed-wise. So, yeah, or you can just bludgeon them, and say, oh well, you took some health, luring out and figuring out that there's a Gengar there. I mean, that makes it so much easier for Lucario to clean up later on. So yeah, or I mean, Infernape is just begging to. We already do see a resurgence of Breloom and Infernape, and matter of fact, one reason I really liked Leech Seed Breloom on that original team I had the Mach Punch Breloom on, that I would like to see used again. The same strategy is that Infernape famously famous for its poor longevity. But with Leech Seed, then suddenly you manage to get Breloom in or Infernape in on something that's leeched. I mean, not easier said than done, of course, but you give it more another source of longevity, so you are more able to contend with rocks and sand or flare, blitz, recoil, whatever it is. You turn more freely, things of that nature. So, yeah, that's basically it from me. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that I would like to do besides go to bed. um, yeah, I wonder if there's yeah, I mean, you could run. I'm trying to think. What's Protect Breloom ever used besides on? Okay. You know what? Let's invent a Breloom set on the spot. You know what I want to see used? I want to see Sub Protect Leech Seed Facade or Sky Uppercut, whatever Breloom used next. I don't think I've seen that used yet, and it is begging. And make it Mach Punch last. I don't care. Matter of fact, my old friend from YouTube, um, uh, Sucker for Jessica was his name. And he was talking about, it's like, oh, dude, I love Leech Seed Breloom with Mach Punch because, you sub seed. He was using like sub seed, Spore, sub seed, Mach Punch. And he was like, oh, dude, it's so great because you sub seed stall them down to low health and then you pick them off with Mach Punch and then you still have the sub. He was a very creative player. So, yeah, that is Just an example. So yeah, that's my closing request for this video. Go out there and make subseed protect filler move work. Yeah, use spore. Don't do any damage at all besides leech seed. Be walled by clefable. Yeah. Um, okay, that's basically it for me. I'm sure there's ways to figure out how to use like worry seed Breloom or something. Um, but that's more of a black and white thing, I think, because you got your poison heal Gliscor there, and magic guard Reenclus, of course. Whereas here you don't need it as much. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.